the rest of the game is going to be played out and think about what's going to work out best. So really interesting. But speaking of the first matchup we mentioned earlier, it's going to be Firebat versus Chakki. And the classes they have are Shaman, Warlock, Warrior, and Mage for Firebat. And Chakki has Warrior, Shaman, Druid, Warlock. So just the Druid and the Mage being the two different classes there.
Yeah.
So how do you think, obviously we don't exactly know what decks, these decks are not open, so the players don't know, the deck lists of each other or anything like that. These are completely closed deck lists. How do you think, just looking at classes, these are going to line up? Because I imagine the Shaman ban might be a thing.
It's a possibility. But what I will say is I think the reason why we didn't see Shamans being banned too much at DreamHack is because that makes you very, very predictable. If your opponent knows that you're just going to ban Shaman, then suddenly they have that extra element of freedom when designing their lineup, right? They're like, 9 games out of 10, my Shaman gets banned, so this is my remaining lineup. So if you want to go next level with it, you bring a lineup that beats Shaman. You bring 2 decks that beat Shaman, so if one of them gets banned, you still have another answer to it. And then you leave Shaman up, and then suddenly the person who's expecting their Shaman to get banned every game is a little bit confused. One of the decks that we saw doing that very well was the breakout deck of the tournament, the Prophet himself, Mr. Radu, G2's RDU with his Tempo Mage. And there is a decent chunk of Mage in this tournament. Yeah. I think 9 or 10 people have brought Mage. I don't expect too much of it to be Freeze Mage, because in Last Hero Standing, Freeze Mage is just a 1-win deck, and you want your decks to do more than that. So I would be suspecting that most of the Mages are Tempo Mages, in which case, maybe we see the Shaman getting left up a little bit more.
Yeah, especially so. Like the tactic we saw was like the Shaman mirror is a mirror. So you just we'll just play what you can, do your best, and see how it turns out. Yeah. The Warlock, if it's Zoo, has actually one of the best matchups you're really going to get against that deck. And then, as you said, when you bring a third one that beats Shaman, you're just like, okay, leave it up, open up the flexibility to ban something else that your whole lineup's a little bit more weaker to, and then deal with it from there. So it will be interesting to see how it goes, because it feels like you just should ban Shaman a lot of the time. Cause you know what I mean, though? Because we saw it at DreamHack where some players didn't ban it and then just got 3-0'd. And it's just like, it can happen. And it looks like we have got the bans too, actually. And Chakki banned Warrior and Firebat banned Warlock. So I'll give you that one, Sol. You can have that one. Take it for free.
Yeah, I mean, it's not to say that it's right? Like, a lot of people came into DreamHack with this strategy of saying, I'm not going to ban Shaman. And on the first day, we kind of saw it working out. There were a lot of 3-2 series, and a 3-2 series is generally a series that's played out as people have expected it to, because that's generally how you build a Last Hero Standing lineup, right? Where, decks counter each other, and then you just have that one edge at the end.
Yeah.
Whereas a 3-0 sweep on either side, like, something's gone wrong. And we saw more of that on the second day, second and third days, when we really got down to like the knockout. Then we started seeing the 3-0 Shamans coming in. So it's a strategy that people tried leaving Shaman up at DreamHack, and it was mixed results, let's put it that way. But Chakki knocking out the Warrior is definitely interesting. Firebat banning the Warlock, so it looks like he just does not want to deal with Zoo, which maybe suggests that some of his decks are a little bit more greedy. One of his decks that could potentially be greedy is that Warrior list, although most builds of Cthulhu Warrior are favoured against Zoo these days, so interesting decision.
But we are going into the first game as the players are ready. It's going to be Chakki on the Warrior and Firebat on the Shaman. So making especially looking at the opening hand, a fair assumption that this is the aggro Shaman list. There have been a few other lists knocking around. But I think this list is just too consistent, too powerful to almost like not want to take, right?
Yeah, I'm kind of curious as to what list Chakki runs in Shaman these days, because Chakki and Sixo were basically the two players who experimented with putting a little bit more mid-game beef into the face Shaman deck. But Chakki did it with Master of Evolution and Nerubian Prophet. That was the list that he ran for a while, whereas Sixo went with the list that caught on everywhere with Tuskar Totemic and Thing from Below. So I wonder if Chakki's bit the bullet and said, all right, Sixo, you were right on this one.
You got this better.
One. I'm just going to play that.
Yeah, so this list actually from Chakki as well for the Warrior, it appears to be the Dragon Warrior variant. At least in my experience, this list can do pretty damn well versus Shaman.
Yeah, this is a very, very favoured matchup. Around 60% for the Warrior, which, people might hear that and say, well, Soto, you said it was very favoured, and then you said 60%. People overstate the hell out of matchups. 60% is really damn favoured, okay? So when I say it's really favored at 60%, it definitely is. But yeah, interactions like Alexstrasza's champion into a Tunnel Trog early, what we're about to see with potential Fiery War Axe and Blood to Ica taking out a Totem Golem, all these things add up incrementally. And the Warrior just has the right mix of removal and its own aggression just to be able to successfully set up a race against Shaman most of the time.
Yeah, and we see there Firebat got off to a pretty decent start, though, with the coin Totem Golem into the 1-drop. So he did get the Ardent Squire out. There is a chance that Chakki can actually just clear off the Totem Golem and use the Blood to Ica on the, either one, really, and then use the Slam on the opposite minion to draw a minion, to draw a card, sorry. But he could actually just favour getting the Fairy Dragon down instead, Blood to Ica the Totem Golem, and kill that off to have 2 minions on the board, which I think I actually like over anything else here.
Yeah, Fairy Dragon is a very strong card in this matchup because normally if you can get it down in a position where it's board dominant, you get a Rockbiter weapon out of your opponent's hand, which long term is a win for you. If they have to use a Rockbiter as removal, then that's a positive. But it looks like Chakki is going for the full board removal play here. This can put him in a position where he's nicely contested on the board. The other way around, he would have opened himself up to Abusive Sergeant or Flametongue Totem on a still Divine Shielded 1/1, which could have then traded into his Fairy Dragon or his 2/2 for value. So this way, contest the board more effectively. And as I said, the only nice way to deal with this for Firebat is that Rockbiter weapon or a Lightning Bolt, which, long term isn't that bad for you as the Warrior player.
Yeah, and I think this is okay as well because he doesn't have any dragons in hand at the moment other than the Fairy Dragon. So if he were to draw into a Twilight Guardian this turn, for example, he could play it, get the buff, get the extra damage and the taunt, so be useful. And because his turn was good enough beforehand, like, why not, right? Hold on to the dragon for just one more turn.
Don't see why not. Corcoran Elite, again, another very effective card in this matchup. The timing of where it comes down in the matchup, if it comes down on curve, it very often interacts with a Feral Spirit. You see it here taking out a Flametongue Totem. Lots of great targets for the charge to actually pick up value because of the 3 health. It's not a vulnerable charge minion like a Wolf Rider. You can often use it flexibly to get value on the board. And there you see that Rockbiter is being used, which does put him in a dominant position on the board, but with that Doomhammer in hand, he would have loved to pile up that combination together on a later turn.
Yeah, as you said, though, you got to use the Rockbiter there to just clear off the Corcoran, as it would have been kind of awkward, and I guess the idea is guarding the board means that you get repeat damage from the minions, especially with that Taunt Totem down, and only the War Axe to really challenge it. But a second Corcoran Elite, it looks like it could come down here, as we see he's decided to just float the Corcoran. There we go. It does land onto the board, kill off the totem and allow Chakki to actually deal with the 3/2. And again, it just, slow the Shaman down and not really give Firebat too much of a board to work with.
Yeah, I mean, he's doing what Warrior does in this matchup, which is tend to stay kind of half a turn ahead of the play. He's ending his turn every turn in a board dominant position and asking the Shaman to have the answers. Quite often the Shaman will and is successfully doing so. If he can compound on this from here and pick up a Twilight Guardian just to wall out some of this damage now over the following turns, that, when you're hidden behind that big taunt, is when you can really start to make the aggressive push yourself. Yeah,
with the lack of Alexstrasza's champion being in the hand early, Chakki didn't really get the option to go aggressive himself. So yeah, as you said, just grinding the Shaman down, not letting him build too much on the board. And interesting choice here, you can go for the Ghoul and the Fairy Dragon, but then that actually deactivates the Blackwing Corruptor. But then the Blackwing Corruptor onto like the 1/1, it clears the board and puts a big minion there for you, but it just always feels a bit like, 3 damage into the 1/1 doesn't always feel great when there are a lot of better targets in the Shaman deck. But that could be enough to actually just put you ahead, because other than like a lightning bolt, other than like a lava burst, like Firebat's probably not going to want to double face tank this, and Chakki's gone with the third option of Smork Life.
Yeah, I was going to say, you also have to consider your clock here, because Doomhammer is a clock. It's one of the fastest clocks in the game. So you have 2 ways to react to this. You can either start rationing out your cards with a hero power each turn to try and buy yourself extra turns that way, or you can just accelerate your own clock and try and set up lethal. So I imagine the goal of this is just to get the clock onto the Shaman here, use things like Slam and Ravaging Ghoul to clear out any potential board on the following turn, also contest a thing from below that might come down, and then he's going to try and bank on Ragnaros to get him through, which obviously is exponentially more powerful if he can use his tools like Ravaging Ghoul and Slam to clear out the board. And Firebat double tanks the 5/4 like an absolute god. Puts him to 9, which is an important number because it means he doesn't die to a rag flip unless some extra damage is going to be pushed through.
Yeah, exactly. With nothing else on board after the Corruptor being killed and Firebat having the thing from below to block the damage, Warrior, other than Ragnaros, doesn't really have a way to just shoot past the taunt. So it looks like Chakki's going to have to go for the Ghoul here. Clear up the 1-1. Again, just sort of ask Firebat, okay, now I have a Froth in. Have you got any way to kill it that isn't your weapon? If not, you have to run in the thing from below, and then suddenly, your face isn't really guarded anymore.
Yeah, so Tuskar Totemic will come down here. He's going to try and find an answer. Flame Tongue Totem would allow him nice trades into the Frothing Berserker. Taunt Totem would give him some protection as well. The second spell damage totem with no spells in hand is not what he's going to want, though. So he's going to, as you said, have to find some way to massage this board position so that 6-3 does not interact with his face. And that is not the easiest thing for him to do right now.
Yeah, and this is really tough as well because he could choose to tank 6, use the Argent Horse Rider then to kill off the Berserker, kill the Ghoul, or just go face and let the Ghoul do its own thing, probably run into the taunt. But that is very risky. If there's like an execute and then suddenly the game's just over, right? So this is kind of rough. Let's see what he's going to do. He's going to drop all the minions. Why not? He has the mana. Oh, Firebat. Looks like he's being brave, taking the 6 damage and just hoping against hope that Chakki isn't going to draw an execute there. He does kill it off, so he leaves it on 1.
Yeah, I mean, leaving the Frothing alive was vulnerable to a lot more things there, because if he could have got through your taunt and connected the Frothing with face, that would have just been straight up lethal most of the time. So, anything simple as like Corcoran Elite, I think both have been used, but Alexstrasza's Champion, Execute, combinations of Slam and Blood to Ica, like all of these things that could have dug through it. So taking care of the Frothing definitely seems more realistic, and he's created himself a board position which is very, very dominant in Proceedings right now. But again, that Slam, if he'd have picked up one of those Alexstrasza's Champions, he would have had lethal right there. But as you said, they have been nowhere to be seen this game, and he's staring down, what's that, 8, 10, 11, 15 damage on the board right now. So even if he armors up, any damage drawn would be lethal.
Yeah, I think we're going to have to see, probably lean towards a Slam and just play the Crusher out. There isn't too much that can really guard against the Crusher other than more taunts from Firebat, but Firebat only being on 1 card a turn is what Chakki's going to have to try and cash in on here and just play the minions out, do what he can, hope lethal isn't drawn, and then just rely on the Crusher to just finish the game. This is really close, though. This is Firebat being really aggressive with the Doomhammer and clearing the board, and another thing from below, so he can put a taunt in the way of that Crusher.
Which is a very, very big deal. There's no execute proc in hand, so there's not a single card that would get drawn that would allow him to answer this 5/5. So Alexstrasza's Champion would be the only thing that he can pick up here with the 9/9, as well as Grom,
And War Axe as well.
And War Axe, sources of 3 damage or more.
Or it's just going to be Rag.
Yeah, I mean, if there's no draw, we are going to have to see Rag. And now we have the options, okay? So dropping Ragnaros right here is a straight up 1 in 8 to win the game. So he's evaluating the state of his deck, which is probably correct, that he has more than 1 in 8 chance based on his remaining cards to pick up that source of damage. Don't think we've seen 1 War Axe. So there's 2 Alexstrasza Champion, 1 War Axe, and a Grom left in the deck. That's 4 draws. So yeah, he was naturally better odds. Unless he had 24 cards remaining in his deck, he was better odds with the redraw there.
Yeah, and obviously the key being that even with the using the Drake, he had the Fairy Dragon in hand, so Alexstrasza's Champion would have procced and been able to charge in. So
I sang that. There's only 3, right? Because Grommy doesn't have the mana for anymore after the redraw.
That's true.
So it's actually a lot closer than that.
Yeah. Do you think 3 is better than a 1 in 7, though?
Again, depending on how many cards he's drawn, but this deep into the game, he should be below 22. So yeah, it's right. Yeah, 16 cards left. So the redraw is almost certainly correct, but he is going to have to find something special to get himself out of this game. But although, again, there is not lethal on board, there'll need to be a source of damage drawn from Firebat here.
Yeah, this is tough. Looks like he's going for ping, so he can try and kill off the minions next turn. But never mind. There's the Flame Tongue Totem, and Firebat, with a very brave play with that Doomhammer, got just enough to finish out the game. And that was a pretty crazy first game, actually. I expect nothing less from these guys.
Yeah, and this is the danger, right? Because Shaman is now off and running. It's won a matchup where it's unfavored. So now you've immediately lost one of your decks that you've brought to counter it with. So you're now in this position where the Shaman 3-0 sweep is potentially on. And this is the danger that we talked about at the start of proceedings, where Shaman can just get carried away like that. And if you are able to pick up those wins in the unfavored matchup, which it's entitled to do because it has draws that just beat everything, which, that's not discounting Firebat's play in that game. That was not a draw that beat everything. That was Firebat being incredibly brave with his life total. And just rationing out the number of turns that he needed by using the Doomhammer to clear. And now you see it. Chakki thinks his best option is just to queue into the Shaman Mirror. So he has a 50-50 here. If he doesn't win it, then we are quite possibly going to see our first Shaman 3-0 sweep.
Yeah, and just to remind everyone, Chakki's options were Shaman or Druid, as he did have his Warlock banned out. So you imagine if it was the Zoo lock, he would have really liked to lock that in against the Shaman, but he can't. And it is going to be Shaman as opposed to the Druid. So as you said, 50-50, and it looks like already Firebat's got a pretty good opening hand versus the hand at least we saw pre-Mulligan from Chakki. But the actual redraw isn't too shabby either.
Yeah, Argent Squires from both, but the Totem Golem in Firebat's hand is potentially going to be a big deal here because there's not an efficient answer. Okay, that Rockbiter weapon potentially changes things because now there is a good answer to the Totem Golem, but it will interrupt his curve just a little bit, but still better than having no answer to it at all.
Yeah, and the way this matchup normally plays out is that both players very, very aggressively play for the board. And the second one player has a strong turn and their opponent loses the board and can't grab it back, the game pretty much just snowballs out of control and normally ends pretty quickly after that.
Yeah, so now there are options. We drew Tunnel Trog, which curves out nicely with our Rockbiter weapon this turn if we want to take the trade into the Totem Golem. Or, alternatively, we could just go for the Feral Spirits play and try and, just deal with the Totem Golem over the next 2 turns. But having just drawn that Tunnel Trog now, this looks like the most appealing line to me, to just drop the Trog, Rockbiter up your 1-1, take out the 3-4, go from there.
Yeah, you also get to hold on to the coin here, and it opens up a multitude of next turn plays. It just removes the Totem Golem off. Your opponent's going to be overloaded as well, so that definitely helps out. Plays the Trog, and Firebat's on 2 mana here. And I imagine with Finley as well, he also is going to respond with a pretty good turn of his own, playing Finley, going in for the Rockbiter. And what is the choice here, Sol?
Is a very good question. In most matchups, Life Tap is a snap pick almost all the time. But as you said, this matchup, the mirror match, is fought primarily about early board control. And whoever gets early board control is going to win the game. So generally, the favored hero powers are the ones that affect the board. Very few affect the board better than the mage. So I definitely agree with the mage decision here. But yeah, mage, druid, even rogue sometimes are very effective ones to pick up in this matchup.
Yeah, and we see Chakki with an interesting card choice into this deck. We did see some players such as Board Control do this in his Shaman deck for DreamHack, and he did play the Lightning Storm to give you a much better matchup versus the Mirror. That one card could actually change everything, because as we said earlier, this whole early game is about board control, and that Lightning Storm can just, completely reset the board for you or push even further ahead. So it'll be really interesting to see Firebat. Not that he can really play around the Lightning Storm, but just how he gets to react to it.
And speaking of which, the Lightning Storm might come into play sooner rather than later, because that Flame Tongue totem picked up off the Tuskar Totemic is huge here, but this Lightning Storm is actually concealed as well. This is not a format where the deck lists are out, like we've seen in Top 16 of DreamHack or Hearthstone Championship Tour events, where you can accurately play around Lightning Storm because it's in your opponent's deck. When it's concealed, there's always that tendency to think, okay, sure, some people have been teching this in recently, have been bringing it to tournaments, but still, I'm not 100% sure that it's going to be in the list, so it might not even be worth playing around. And having now drawn the Flame Wreath Faceless, that is a nice way to play around Lightning Storm.
Yeah, that's really interesting though. Did you Chakki had the option to coin out Lightning Storm there, and that's a lot of damage he's taken this turn. Do you think he was just trying to hold off one more turn to get even more value from it?
So I think potentially most minions that were dropped here would get caught in the Lightning Storm as well, excluding the 7/7. If something was not to get finished off this turn, he has the option to coin the Horse Rider as well to deal with it. So he's kind of increasing his consistency at the cost of a little bit of damage there by holding onto the Lightning Storm. Just so happens that the 7/7 is the one card that punishes him extremely hard in this situation then.
Yeah, and this is a hell of a lot of damage Chakki's going to have to face. He is going to go for the Lightning Storm now, probably really hoping for a high roll onto the Flame Wreath. Not that it's going to do too much, it's still a 7/4, and as you mentioned, he can't really kill it this turn, so he's just going to go with a Tuskar Totemic, put as much as he can on the board, hope against hope for a Totem Golem, and got a Mana Tide, so not too bad. It's going to allow him to increase his cycle through the deck, and actually, maybe that will be enough for Chakki to claw this game back. So at the moment, it's looking pretty horrible as those Feral Spirits get brought out from Firebat.
Double Doomhammer picked up from Chakki, not what he wants to see. This is the idea behind 2 Doomhammers in this deck is so that you draw 1 and exactly 1 every game. You almost never want the second one unless you're trying to push through against some cranked up Cthulhu warrior that's played Justicar and Ancient Shieldbearer already, and you really need to jam through all that damage. But the second Doomhammer, very, very unlikely to have a factor in this game. And what do you think of the decision there, respecting the card draw, sending 7 damage into a 0/3 instead of jamming it to face while he already had a Doomhammer in hand?
Yeah, I think it's okay, actually. Like, when your opponent can draw 2 cards a turn in this kind of matchup, you can limit that. And also, in a roundabout way, he was still just playing for the board, right? Because that, the Mana Tide Totem can still get affected by Flame Tongue. So I think the idea is very similar to the way you play Zoo Mirror. You just beat the board down, and with no board, your opponent can't do anything. As on 4 health, the Flame Wreath Faceless is actually pretty secure versus everything but a Lava Burst.
Yeah, and the Lava Burst, although it's an efficient removal on the turn it's used, overall it's a 5 mana commitment to deal a relatively small amount of damage. So you're generally not too sad if your opponent has to use a Lava Burst for removal, and it's consistent with the way Firebat played the previous game as well. You saw him in the previous game just relentlessly using his Doomhammer for ball control and removal, and you saw exactly the same thing going on there. Representing his life total, just smashing away with the Doomhammer, making sure that he had ball control at all times. And again, you see the same thing happening here. 4 more to face, using his own Doomhammer, takes out the Flame Tongue, pushes face, and it looks like Chakki is going downhill very, very quickly here.
Yeah, and we saw the power that we talked about earlier of Finley. Again, it wasn't necessarily in the Warrior deck, but Finley giving Firebat the ping meant that he could take even less damage. He could ping 1 health off the Feral Spirit and hit it with just 1 hit, instead of maybe having to trade a minion like the Flame Wreath if he wasn't comfortable with taking 8 that turn. But yeah, really well played from Firebat. Again, just played for the board 100% of the game, and it just became too much for Chakki to come back from. So 2-0 so far for Firebat in a really quick set so far, and we're going to go straight in to the 3rd game, and it is going to be Chakki's Druid. And as we realised pretty quickly, he thinks the Shaman 50/50 has a better matchup than this what appears to be Cthulhu Druid versus Firebat's Aggro Shaman.
Yeah, and I would tend to agree with him more or less. Cthulhu Druid does have some draws. You really, really need to hit that early ramp. More so Innovate than Wild Growth. You're looking at something like Innovate Dark Arakoa or Turn 1 Twilight Elder are your 2 big plays in this matchup most of the time. Chakki doesn't have any of that right now. He just has a kind of vanilla curve of average-looking dudes. So be interesting here to see if he even keeps the Beckner of Evil, or whether he decides he needs to go all in for removal options and ramp.
Yeah, because the problem with the Beckner of Evil, it is an early minion. He is going to keep hold of it, but it only does 2 damage, which doesn't really line up versus most Shaman early minions anyway. Right. Yeah, a lot of it is 3s in general. But yeah, I agree. The way Druid wins this matchup, and it can, is that it's defensive enough early on to keep a reasonable health total, and then chain drops taunts that the Shaman can't get through easily. But you need to be at enough health to not just die through spells. That, I think that's the main trick here. And as you said, being able to ramp up quickly really helps with that. But Firebat's opening hand is looking pretty nice, to be honest.
It is. The 7/7 is huge in a lot of matchups, but some classes have relatively efficient answers to it. Rogue can sap. The long-forgotten Priest class that I'm told does still exist in Hearthstone can Shadow Earth Death it. So some classes have answers. Druid, not so much. Cthulhu Druid has generally moved away from the 1 copy of Mulch that a lot of people were playing at one point. That's generally more seen in the Yogg Druid build that wants to be more spell-heavy. So the 7/7 comes down early enough. It's very, very difficult for the Druid to deal with that most of the time, but without hitting the ramp, this is about as good a start as Chakki could have hoped for here. Beckoner of Evil is just something to contest the board early. You see it, they're taking out a Tuskar Totemic. On top of that, he picked up Wrath and Living Roots, so he's got all of his early game survivability options.
Yeah, and most importantly, Chakki has the Druid Halo locked in on his portrait, which is definitely going to help. But Firebat's still looking pretty good. He's got multitude of options with double Feral Spirit in hand, although that will overload him, so he can't play the Flame Wreath. So looks like he's going to go for the Argent Horse Rider here, potentially. Oh, is he just going face? Okay. So what he's doing now is just putting in the early damage that he can with the minions before the huge taunts come down. And he's pretty confident that Chakki's going to trade into these guys. Double Divine Shield means that they're not too open to a swipe without at least trading the minions in first.
Yeah, and I respect the face attack a lot. He could have, as you said, just traded both Divine Shields into the 2-3 there, but then he'd be sat with 2 1-health minions on the board against these 2 1-1 saplings. So, how well does that end for him? So by keeping both Divine Shields up, it's actually making his board more difficult to trade into. It would take a hero power as well from Chakki. So the face damage definitely makes sense here. And as you said, did have the double Feral Spirits option, which might seem like a stronger play initially, but he really wants to jam that 7-7 on curve.
Yeah, and as you said, it's not really too bit difficult for Druid to deal with, especially after using that Wrath. So, the option he had at the time was like, right, swipe turn 4, or, swipe turn 5 onto the 7-7, then Wrath it down, hope for no heal totem. There are so many awkward things you have to do as the Druid, but you can just try and get bigger minions and then just run into it. But the Flame Wreath Faceless actually just kills all, or at least most of your minions off whilst trading anyway. So definitely a tough one. And Firebat's got the option to put his down now, but with only with 6 power already on board, choosing to actually just go for the Feral Spirit. Too likely that the Faceless was going to die, which means that, and then he'll just lose all the tempo he can get.
Yeah, as I said, the Flame Wreath is the huge card in this matchup, so he's really wanting to set up a position here where it's potentially uncontested on the board, but Chakki just keeps picking up answers. He's going to use the top deck swipe here as opposed to the one that he had in his hand, and that gives him a complete board clear, and more importantly, a complete board clear that retains him a minion in play. So now, immediately, 3 mana only available to Firebat, and the second Feral Spirits, which is really his only viable option on this turn, just immediately contested on the board by this Klaxi Amberweaver.
Yeah, he's going to be able to trade one and then not even go for a swipe or anything. And this is exactly what I was talking about earlier. Chakki's on a good amount of health still. Firebat's not been able to get a lot of damage to the face, and even with those attacks earlier on. And if Chakki can continue to just build the board, he's still got his second swipe. It's your Drake to cycle. Even the Twilight Elder trades really well into a lot of the Shaman minions. This could actually just slip out of Firebat's hands very, very quickly here, as there's not even too great an option with your Flame Wreath Faceless. If he plays it, it's going to die almost certainly. And yeah, it's looking pretty rough, actually. Just go for it, though, as the rest of his turns, or the rest of his options aren't really too strong for this turn.
Yeah, I mean, you say it dies almost certainly, but from Firebat's perspective, he's already seen a Wrath, he's seen a Living Roots, he's seen a Swipe, so you might be entitled to think, well, how much more removal does he have? In which case, the 7-7 doesn't die on board because there's the Taunt in the way protecting him. So, you're definitely entitled to feel like your 7-7 survives here, but he's held onto it looking for a turn where it was more dominant than that opportunity he had to play it on turn 4, and that opportunity hasn't really arisen. Which makes you question, whether or not he was supposed to play the 7-7 all the way back on turn 4. Again, the play he made was definitely resilient against Druid. There's very few ways that Druid was able to interact with that board, but the swipe itself was just too backbreaking, and we see Chakki even has the spare to use even now.
Yeah, and the problem is, he has put the Flame Wreath down, and, as you said, trying to get the most out of it, but Druid's going to continue to slam more and more minions, and make it more and more difficult for the 7-7 to get too much work done. And by work, I actually just mean going face. So the Druids just started to stack up too much now, as Chakki's looking, he's got a pretty good hold on this game, at least so far, even having the Harrison in hand. So if a Doomhammer comes out, he can just immediately answer it and draw a hell of a lot of cards.
Yeah, Flame Juggler going to go for the 1-in-3 here. Just goes face. Flame Juggler knows where the place is. Even if the 7-7 hasn't been able to connect, he's going to get his licks in. But still, this board is going to go bye-bye very, very quickly, because that Azure Drake being developed by Chakki, I absolutely love, by the way. A lot of people would have been tempted to just deal with the 7-7 right there and then. he set up this annoying board where there was an Azure Drake hidden behind the 5/7 taunt. So 90% of the time, you see the 7/7 go into the 5/7, right? Which leaves the 7/7 on 2 health, which is a nice number to have when you have spell damage on board and a swipe in hand. And yeah, you see there, Firebat says, all right, that's enough. I'll give you this one. Good job. My Shaman is down. I'm going to have to rely on a different deck here. And Chakki will be breathing a sigh of relief in that situation for sure. And Firebat wastes no time. Is it going to be the RDU mage? It looks very much like it.
Yeah, it definitely looks like Tempo. We'll see if it has the double flame strike. But I've seen so many iterations of Tempo Mage, and even in the past week, there's some with your favorite card, the Kabbalist Tome.
Just don't get me started. That card is so bad.
There's the, the sort of draw cycle heavy one, so maybe more aggressive version that Hot Form has sort of, brought to light very recently. And then, as we said, there's RDU's version, which is has the 2 flame strikes as its signature sort of cards in there. But how do you feel like this matchup is going to go against the Cthulhu Druid?
Yeah, not in a matchup that I have a great deal of experience with, to be honest. I mean, classically, back in the day, mid-rangey, slightly aggressive druids, shall we say, was Tempo Mage is one of the best decks at crushing them. But a lot of that was down to how efficient Flame Cannon was. And Roaring Torch, which has been the replacement in some lists, it might not even be featured in this one, depending on what build he's playing, doesn't really get the same job done. So I can definitely see Druid curving out in a way that Tempo Mage isn't able to interact with. But if the Mage does get off to the aggressive starts that they're capable of, and we see a very aggressive start sitting in Firebat's hand right now, I don't think too much will have changed. I think the Tempo Mage will still have enough in its locker to get through here.
Yeah, also just the lack of the mirror entity as well from Mad Scientist, because a lot of the time you used to be able to put a Druid in a position where all their minions are big, so they don't know what to play. So that could have been really awkward. But Tempo Mage is not really playing secrets anymore, but as you said, Firebat does have a pretty quick opening if he wants to. But Chakki's managed to get the 2 living roots down, and Firebat actually passing turn 1. So it looks like he's going to go for a pretty heavy turn 2. The plan probably being Mana Worm into Coin, Sorcerer's Apprentice into Mirror Image, to be able to make that Mana Worm really big and not really give Chakki an option to answer the minions one by one if you just played the the Mana Worm first or the Coin, Sorcerer's Apprentice, Mirror Image.
Yeah, and I just quickly decided to refer to Data Reaper here, because if in doubt, why not? And Data Reaper has Tempo Mage versus Cthulhu Druid as an exact 50-50. So wow. If you guys don't know what Data Reaper is, I'll probably be referring to it a lot over the course of this cast, because it is quite honestly fantastic. It's something that we've needed in Hearthstone for a long time. Data Reaper is an initiative run by the Vicious Syndicate guys, which is collecting data from hundreds and hundreds of players' tracker bot data and giving, thousands of games worth of sample size of what the actual matchup numbers in Hearthstone are. Not what some guy says the matchup is, what the actual results are showing. So their pool of data shows that this is a pure 50-50 matchup.
Yeah, because there is a difference between how the matchup should go and how it actually turns out on the board. But we see there, Chakki did get the Azure Drake down as well, so looking pretty good with the with the innovating it out, get a big minion on the board, difficult to deal with, and Chakki's actually pretty wide on the board now. Firebat doesn't really have a great way to deal with it initially. He can put the mirror image in the way now to create some awkwardness for Chakki in terms of trades. But it's looking at, Chakki's looking like he's doing okay here. And 50-50, that's what this matchup currently looks like it's going so far.
Yeah, it definitely looks like it's hanging in the balance right now. Chakki, again, curving out very, very powerfully. And I like Firebat here picking up some value trades on the board, not just going straight into the 2-3 here to protect his mirror images, because his mirror images are relatively useless here. These mirror images' jobs are to absorb the attacks this turn and protect his Sorcerer's Apprentices on the board. So I like him using his Apprentice's health while he can and just taking out one of those 1/1 living roots.
Klaxi Weaver's going to come down here, and I believe that is not going to get buffed. It's just going to be a Yeti, as we can see Cthulhu pop up there to remind us that he is at 8-8 and not 10-10 as required. So Chakki's even got an okay turn next turn. He can play the Twilight Elder into hero power in response of what Firebat can lay down here. But Water Elemental, one of the trickier minions to deal with almost any deck. As the 3-6 health, really awkward. And if Firebat really wants to, he can even lock Chakki out of being able to aim his 1 damage from his Druid hero power every turn.
Certainly can, but that 1 damage from the Druid Hero Power can come into play right now. Take out that Sorcerer's Apprentice. 3/4 and a 4/5 on the board, so 2 minions that can test this Water Elemental quite nicely, and Firebat's hand, just for now, is running dry. He's going to need to pick up something this turn to help him answer the state of this board. Faceless Summoner is a whiff again, but based on the cards he's drawing here, it looks like very much this is the RDU style build. Faceless Summoner, Ragnaros, that kind of rules out the aggressive Hot Form style list. I wonder exactly how many Flame Strikes he's chosen to put in his deck, though, because the double Flame Strike build was hotly contested, at least by me, while casting, if not anyone else.
Yeah, the problem we had whilst casting that was, 2 Flame Strikes, surely that's a bit overkill. But then RDU won the tournament, and we were like, oh, okay, maybe this is a thing. So we see Firebat there, trading the Water Elemental into the Arakoa there. Gets the damage on, but also, more importantly, freezes the target so it can't actually get an attack off this turn, and allows Firebat to maybe set up a bit of a better kill next turn, especially because he's holding on to that Flame Strike, which is going to be able to at least clear the Arakoa up, and more than likely the Amber Weaver. As you can imagine, Chakki will want to trade this turn with the 3/4.
So Wrath going to go through the cycle, picks up Disciple of Cthulhu. Yeti goes into the Raptor, and he's in a pretty solid board state right now. The Flame Strike is there, which does function as a board clear, but it doesn't really progress his game plan any. He's going to have to still trade off his 5/4 into the 4/6, so this is a board reset with the hope that Ragnaros can carry him from here. Unfortunately, Sylvanas Windrunner might have something to say about that in the near future, but having just picked up Azure Drake, the double card draw cycle with the Bran here is pretty glorious.
Yeah, I mean, Azure Drake and a card in itself is very good. Obviously, still sticking around in decks after so many expansions, but when you get 2 draws off that bad boy, it's pretty hard to pass up. Ragnaros does come down from Firebat, and it does kill off the Drake, but that leaves Bran still up. So this is a tough one, actually. Do you think you even weigh up Arakoa to get the instant value from Bran? Or do you value this Sylvanas for the chance for Rag to hit it? Looks like Sylvanas is going to be Chakki's go-to here.
He is just going to straight up steal the Rag.
Okay,
he draws a card, he innovates the Disciple of Cthulhu. Disciple of Cthulhu does 4 damage because Bran is on the board. Chakki identified this play very, very quickly. Just straight up steals the Rag, no RNG involved, doesn't have to wait to see what the Ragnaros snipes on the following turn. And this puts him in an absolutely dominant position. Generally Tempo Mage, not playing any true hard removal like Polymorph. So suddenly he's in a world of trouble here. But the Azure Drake, in combination with the spells that he has, is going to be able to take care of this Rag. But is that a line that wins you the game?
Yeah, it's a real problem. You're forced to use the Frostbolt as well. And the Arcane Blast, of course. And you do have the Azure Drake on the board, but the minions on the board that are left after Rag, the Bran and the Disciple, are already enough to kill the Drake if Chakki wants. And there's still 2 cards in the Druid hand. And when you're trying to go 1-for-1 with a Druid, a lot of the time you're going to lose, as this is where this Cthulhu Druid excels. In the late game, all of their draws, almost, are actually fantastic. Whereas we can see some of the Mage draws aren't too immediately impactful like the Druids are.
Yeah, I mean, the plan here, as miserable as it might sound to some, is stall game for as long as possible, draw Yogg-Saron, ? That's the line that we're going down here. It's hard to see him redeeming this game through any other means except Yogg, so we're in one of those states in Hearthstone right now where he's just all in on surviving for as long as he can, hoping that Yogg can get the work done that he couldn't, put himself in a dominant position here, but Ragnaros is going to come down right now and speed up that clock significantly. This sets him up for lethal on the following turn, even if the Rag is potentially answered. So the Yogg-Saron draw has to be more or less right now.
Oh, and it is a Frostbolt. Firebat's going to draw with Arcane Intellect, see if anything else he can get. All the early cards he probably would have liked. And notice we've seen like no Flame Wakers from Firebat. Even though he did get off to a pretty quick start, Chakki is able to slow it down, and these missiles are going to have to be pretty damn spot on, getting 3 out of the 5 needed. But as we can see, it's not going to be enough.
Right. From Firebat's perspective, he was hoping for a big clear there, but we can see from Chakki's side, it's all a formality. The swipe was going to get the job done anyway. I think Mirror Images was perhaps the only card that kept him alive there. Mirror images plus something to answer the rag, which would have been a minor miracle, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, because there was he could have frostbolted the face, right? And then just hoped that Rag didn't hit it, but obviously that's a bit of a risk to take. Whereas having so many missiles from the 2 spell damage minions, then you just go for the play and presume he doesn't have it. Because we did see Druid of the Claw, we did see a swipe earlier as well, so Firebat just playing the odds there. And we are going to see the last game in this set. So Chakki's fought it back with this Cthulhu Druid, but now he has to battle Zoo.
He does, and Firebat appears to have gone down the line this set where he threw out maybe his less good matchup, 50-50 or so is the Tempo Mage matchup, just to try and dig out some extra information about what tech cards are in the Cthulhu Druid deck. He didn't really see too much. He's seen Beckoner of Evil already, which is not necessarily a card that you always play. Sometimes you just try and ramp up all the way. We've seen Sylvanas, we've seen Ragnaros, so he knows all these cards are present, but Zoo is a matchup that hasn't really changed too much in terms of how well it beats up on Druid, because Druid is a deck that more or less just plays stats on the board every turn, and Zoo is a deck that eats stats for breakfast.
As we can see right now.
Yeah, exactly. It's like you play your vanilla statted minion on the board, I'm going to play combat tricks every turn, and those two things come out heavily in my favor.
Yeah, Chakki going for the hero power here. I think a lot of newer players might go for the Wrath to cycle, but against Zoo, you want the extra damage that Wrath provides to be able to clear off a bigger minion. Firebat, though, has plenty to choose from as he goes for the Imp Gang Boss this turn, probably looking to set up the Councilman in the following turn. And most importantly, as you mentioned, there's a Power Overwhelming in the hand, which with this 1/1 or maybe 1/1s from the Imp Gang Boss become very useful at dealing with the sort of bigger taunt minions that Chakki's going to be able to drop down later in the game.
Yeah, so I wonder if Chakki's looking at his hand right now and thinking, how do I engineer a swipe? And the answer to that is you can't really engineer a perfect swipe, so he's just going to get his buff done. That is 10-10 achieved already, which means he can play a dominant minion next turn. Like, as many buffs as Zoo plays, a 4-10 is very, very unlikely to get answered. Because anytime 10 damage is capable of being sent into a minion, it's probably better being jammed into face most of the time. So if he's able to give himself a platform to build from here with the 4-10, now suddenly things like Swipe and Wrath can be used to back this up and put him in a solid position over the next couple of turns.
Yeah, second Councilman, though. I mean, if that Councilman plus Direwolf comes down, that's a lot of awkward targets for Chakki to deal with.
Really is, yeah. No mana acceleration for Chakki this game, so no Wild Growth, no Innovate, so he's kind of stuck clunkily playing one card per turn at the moment, and it doesn't quite look like one card per turn is going to be able to stop this rut, but Swipe is definitely one of your go-to cards in this matchup, and yeah, like I said, there is quite happily 10 damage on board right now that can be sent into the 4-10. Firebat says, no, we're having none of that. This baby is going face, and we're putting you to 15.
Yeah, the way almost everyone deals with the Amber Weaver is the fact that it's one minion, regardless of the stats, so it can only attack one thing per turn, and the way you deal with it is by ignoring it and letting it kill itself over time. And that was a lot of damage, as you mentioned. Putting Chakki down to 15, and there's still the Power Overwhelming in hand, and there's still not a fantastic way for Chakki to deal with both of these Councilmen. And Chakki's got to have it in the back of his mind that if he starts clearing the minions here, which he just has to do, if there's, even a Forbidden Ritual, then that's going to just stack up a second Councilman already and just provide even more damage. So really awkward here. Chakki going for the draw, and Cthulhu on turn 5, not really what you're after as of yet.
So Wrath to cycle out means that he can trade now into the 6/4, takes out the Direwolf, but there is already 4, 7, 8 damage on board, 12 with the Power Overwhelming. The Imp Gang Boss buffs him up to 13, so already he is nearly there, but now the decision has to be made. Ooh. How badly do we want to protect that Councilman right now? Because we could use the Power Overwhelming to send a 1/1 into a 4/5 here.
Yeah, I don't know. I think now because of the tap into the Voidwalk, you can just play the Gang Boss Voidwalker, go Fates, and then just cash in on or bank on the Power Overwhelming next turn to finish the game out. That was a really good tap for Firebat here.
Yeah. Imp Gang Boss and, as you said, the small taunt are pretty much ideal here in terms of protecting your board, because you're kind of in a position now where if one minion lives on the board next turn, you're pretty safe. in thinking you'll be able to push through unless a big taunt comes down. So the fact there's a taunt in the way and 2 of your minions are annoying Imp Gang bosses, which mitigate the effects of swipe, you definitely feel very, very confident in being able to push through damage next turn.
Yeah, this is looking really awkward here. Oh, and Chakki just concedes too much damage to do anything with, as he can't deal with the Void Walker and the Councilman at the same time. So Chakki fought back really well there. We thought it was going to be a really quick 3-0 with the Shaman, but did his best with the Druid, but he is going to lose. But bear in mind that this is a round-robin groups format, so Chakki is not out. He's just got to play everyone else and hopefully boost his score up to be able to make it into the top cut. I think we do have the groups live at the moment to give a bit of an update where we're up to in terms of score, as other matches are being played during this time. So do you want to take us through the score so far, Sol?
Yeah, so our UK hopeful and your teammate Ball Control there, right? First up in our first game was defeated by Eloise, so he's not off to the greatest start. Oskaka picking up the victory over Ecop. Tice continuing his dominance, picking up the win over Orange. And Neyman defeating Powder. Firebat and Chakki, the game we just saw. Zalay as well, defeating my boy, Super JJ. So both of our vested interests in this tournament, Raven, are going down round 1, but they still have plenty of time to recover. Like you said, it being round robin format. Gara as well, defeating Hoy. I'd peg that as a small upset. Gara not being someone who's had too much of an impact on the competitive scene recently, whereas Hoy just keeps picking up good results wherever he goes, top 16s, top 8s in major events. And finally, RDU, fresh off the back of that DreamHack victory, taking the victory over AKA Wonder. So, as I said, a lot of these games will be continuing off stream. We will only be broadcasting 1 game from each set of the round robin games, so the rest will be following off stream, but we'll do our best to keep you updated in the progress of proceedings as we're doing right now.
Yeah, so coming up next, we do actually have Life Coach versus Oskaka. So that's going to be one hell of a game. But we're just going to go to a quick break while we sort the players out, get them ready for the match. So stick around, guys. We won't be too long.